the gray.
Yeah.
I get notices about, my first kid just got married, or
Right.
we just had the second child.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
I like to think I'm still 25, 30, but it doesn't happen anymore.
I like to too, until I have to run for something.
Yeah.
Okay, the legs aren't there.
Just kind of fascinating. I always think about how when I first started college, global warming was just starting to be mentioned. And it's a dangerous. Climate change now, climate emergency. It's on, it's upon us.
Mhm.
Whereas back then, people like yourself were mentioning these issues early on.
You're right, but nobody pays attention.
It's like retirement. I'll worry about retirement later. And how do you make that happen at the same plan? What's happening? We're even seeing it in the village now as well with flooding. People don't realize the warmer the air, the hotter, sure. Our systems are not designed for this. That's how that works. We think concrete. Exactly. I'm sure.
And down in Philadelphia, the Parks Department's experimenting with the planting of Carolina Piedmont trees to see how they'll fare.
Oh, with the climate?
Mhm.
Actually, I think Philadelphia is doing some interesting things. I think it was a TED Talk. I saw somebody in Philadelphia talking about things they were doing about urban planning. There seems to be a lot of interesting experiments going on around the world that are happening that are fruitful. It's just going to accelerate that. It's exciting. These guys are all very responsive. I know what they're going to be doing. I feel like they're right now overdo it. Oh, you know what else I'm on?
As soon
It's been
as
very interesting.
environmental to take off.
What do they call it? Environmental Health Council. It's sort of like a citizen advisory.
So what do you
Town
have?
exec. So I've been doing that for the last 8 years. And so it's kind of interesting to hear all the different environmental issues that come up on the counter kind of each other's throats.
This is the special what do you call it, work session of the Town of Manlius Board, and it's a joint session with the Town Board and a Comprehensive Planning Steering Committee. And the purpose of it is to better understand zoning issues broadly, because we know that part of the comprehensive plan in the end is going to be doing some rezoning, but there's a lot of research and philosophy around zoning that we want to be sure we take into consideration before we just tinker with the existing zones and not maybe make a more comprehensive revamping of our mind about zoning. And so that's what we want to do. So we would like to introduce our guest speaker, who is Dr. Emmanuel Carter from ESF, who is going to give a little presentation, and our supervisor, John Deere, is going to advance your slides.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming this afternoon. So what I'd like to do is offer a short, probably 20 minutes or so, presentation and discussion about some of the issues that zoning, needs to address, and that hopefully you will think about addressing in your comprehensive plan process. I also want to start off by saying that zoning is a design discussion. Okay, I think too often in communities there is the the feeling that, okay, it's a legal discussion, but it is a design discussion. What you are trying to do is use zoning as a framework for getting the physical community that you want. Okay? And it's very important in the sense that, once you put together a comprehensive plan, you've got a zoning ordinance, it's hard to undo it, hard to go back to the voters and reverse it or to change large parts of it. And I've gone to some communities over the years where people have said, why is it we keep building landscapes we don't like? And I say, well, let's take a look at what your ordinances call for. And they'll give them to us, we'll read them, and I'll get a couple of students and get them to do some drawings so that people understand, okay, your zoning ordinance allows this. Did you know that? And they're horrified, okay? They were pretty sure that what they put in the words would not beget that. So, as we go through some of the slides, one of the things I'm hoping you'll be thinking about is get your consultants, Barton and Judas, I think you're working with, and Keith Ewald, I taught some years ago, and I know he knows what he's doing. Get him to do the kinds of graphics for you that will help you understand. We could have it this way or that way, okay? Or we could do it another way or another way. But it's hard to get the words to do what you want if you don't actually tie the words to images that you've had a chance to think about or you've had a chance to see good examples of them, okay? So if we can go to the first slide, please. Well, the next one then. And I just call this section textures we want. And I actually took some of these first several slides out of a document that we did for the, let's see, it was a study of the potential for what Syracuse downtown might look like once I-81 viaduct came down. And so, in any case, one of the things that was very clear is that we needed to look not just at, okay, let's get the viaduct down. It was, what do you want in its place? Okay, it's not going to be nothing. It's going to be something. And ideally, developers are going to come and look at that property, and they can come and they can bring their ideas from Atlanta or San Francisco or Chicago or whatever, and just plop down what they want, which, under Syracuse's zoning ordinance, as it stands at the moment, allows for a lot of what you don't want, okay? And so, we were suggesting that, you've got to have a sort of a catalog of textures we want, okay? And if we can go back to the beginning of that group of slides there, I forgot that they'll advance on their own. Okay, so right there, yeah. So, several of these shots are actually from the city of Philadelphia in its historic district, Society Hill. And what we were looking at is the relationship of moderate density housing and public open space, okay? If you want to attract people to neighborhoods, you want them to have good open space within walking distance, and it matters what it looks like. It can't just be a little grass and a few trees. You need some articulation. And so, we showed this to SMTC and their team and to State DOT and to the city, so that they would get a sense of the backfill needs to be something that is beautiful. People run towards beauty, they run away from the opposite, okay? And it's worth it to actually think in detail about the kind of atmosphere you want to have people to live in. Everyone, all of you, if you bought a house, you paid attention to what's across the street, down the block, around the corner, and it matters. And if you saw anything you really didn't like, you bought another house, okay? It matters, okay? So if we can go to the next one, please. Okay, and sometimes, when you're thinking about residential development, it doesn't necessarily have to face on a street. I mean, often it does, most often it does, but this is a courtyard around which is a mixture of 1740s houses and modern houses built in a similar fashion. The beauty of which for the city's tax base is that you can get $1.5 million out of people to live in something of a 1740 scale because they're in a courtyard like that, right in the middle of downtown Philadelphia. Okay. So another thing you want your zoning to do is to create uniqueness. All right. What do we offer in our communities, and especially in your villages? What do we offer that is a little uncommon, that might make people want to come and live in that, and might make the people who are a block away or across the street feel a new value in their place because this uniqueness is across the street. Okay, so but your zoning has to articulate that. Okay, so the words that talk about begetting this kind of uniqueness should be based on somewhere in your files or somewhere in the documents that are part of the process, a sketch. Okay, make Keith sketch. He's good at it. Yeah, look for opportunities for uniqueness. All right. And by the way, given that we now live in an era where planners, the planning literature, but also the practitioners and the citizens are beginning to warm to the idea of the 15-minute community. Okay. The 15-minute community implies the ability to walk to most of your needs in any given week within, in 15 minutes. What that implies also is that whatever is unique in your community, you get to see it at pedestrian speed. Okay. If you've ever seen some of the architecture that gets awarded in the magazines, and you realize that, okay, if I'm in a helicopter 500 yards away, that's a beautiful building. If I get up close to it, it may be something else entirely. Okay, but if you have a 15-minute community and people are walking around to take care of their business, then you want the kind of detailing that is inspirational or beautiful or complex, interesting. All right. And so opportunities to find unique settings and do unique buildings and landscapes. You want that into your zoning. And the reason I say that you want it in the document itself is because at the time a developer comes and their consultant's already done half the work, or worse, is simply going to move something from Toledo to here, and it's already done, they're still going to charge you the full rate. But okay, they're going to be disinclined to change it. You're going to start to look like you're being picky. You're wasting their time. Or you're being elitist or something like that. No, when they get your documents before they do anything, hopefully, they'll see, we're encouraging uniqueness, and we're encouraging uniqueness in several kinds of ways. Take a look at the sketches that should be illustrating your zoning document. Okay, take a look at the sketches and you'll see some of the ideas that we think bring on uniqueness. You can improve on that. I like to always say to when students are working their studio work, you can add, but you can't subtract. Okay, you can make it better, nothing less than X.
I think what you're saying is be proactive, don't be reactive to
Yes.
developers. Anticipate what they might be thinking about and almost give them guiding questions or guiding ideas. Because otherwise they're just going to take what they did, like I said, at Toledo. Here's the way Target looks there, we're going to Target here.
Yes.
Right. And
Exactly.
what you're saying is then that ultimately hurts your community, because now, as my wife and I was talking about, we go to somewhere for something and everything looks the same.
Yeah.
Here it looks the same. I like that, be proactive, and I like the idea of sketches, because I think zoning is hard to get your visuals around it.
Yeah.
Zoning requirements, right?
Yeah, and so the visuals need to accompany the words. And if a developer is not willing to do those kinds of things that you might want, they'll let you know. Okay, and you can say, well, that's all right. Okay, somebody else will come and maybe take a shot at this location. But if you look as a community, as if you have a sense of what it is you want the people, you want your citizens to have access to, you want your citizens to experience, and it goes beyond the political level. Where do you want to raise a family? Okay, and you have a right as a community to say to those who will come and buy property and build that you want families raised in atmospheres that support uniqueness, beauty, a 15-minute walkable community, okay, public open space, everything to feel good about. That's not a wrong thing for a political entity to ask for, to demand. Okay. So, okay, can we go to the next one, please? Okay, and again, here the point is just simply, again, moderate density housing, tree-lined streets. And we can go to the next one, which would be a variation on that, winter shot, but still same emphasis on tree-lined streets. By the way, if you go back to that picture, at one point some years ago, the cobblestones in that street started missing. And the city wondered what's going on. A housing developer in North Jersey would send trucks down to Philadelphia on Sunday nights when there was minimum amounts of people circulating. Take up the cobblestones, put them in the dump trucks, and take them to their new colonial-looking housing project and drop them in there. They went to jail. But,
Literally the textures they want.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. If outsiders come and start picking up pieces of it, you've got it.
No,
right.
you got something unique.
Right. I don't know. I did know when I saw the article in the Inquirer, but I can't think of it now.
But that's such an interesting idea because we ended up, hi by the way, I'm Heather Waters, and sorry to be
Nice to
for
meet
you. Nice to meet you too. Thank you for being here. We pulled up our brick and walkway, and it was a brick that was extra wide and big, and our friend who was relayed it, and it was just amazing to see that it gave it so much character to use the same materials. So it's difficult. It's difficult to strive for, I would assume in zoning, or ask for something that feels like it's more expensive or but it's around sustainability too, and carbon reduction. So those are things we encounter all the time. So I'm listening for that. The
Yeah.
ideas around that.
And we'll come to some things that are more specifically ecological that that I think you can throw into into your ordinance. But again, I think if you're talking to the people that really care about your community, asking them, they don't have to do the most unique thing on the planet, but you might ask for, where do you, talking to the developer and their consultants, where do you see the most interesting opportunity to do something unique? And it might just simply be a really nice doorway to a business, okay? I don't know if any of you have ever been to a place called Chestnut Hill. Okay, and again, by the way, you'll get this if you haven't suspected it already. I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I use it as a field trip city for my students. Okay, in any case, Chestnut Hill is a part of Philadelphia that it's a neighborhood, but all my students, when they see it, they think it's a separate village. Okay, it is not. It's a neighborhood, but and no famous designer has ever done anything there, and yet they can't get over the texture. And what it is that along Germantown Avenue, all the shops, you'd swear you were, out somewhere on Cape Cod, or you were, Bar Harbor or whatever. And it's the little gestures, really beautifully refined entranceways, interesting awnings, window displays that are actually attractive. Okay. It's lighting. Okay. And Sometimes they might do something special. They may have a special brick pattern,
Mhm.
you know, at their entranceway. Or they might have a little foyer, so the building's set back just a hair.
Mhm.
And by the way, never parking that comes out to the sidewalk. That's back in the middle of the block,
Mhm.
okay? You know, you get the beauty of the opportunities that good architecture gives you. Parking's just parking. All right. So, okay, can we go to the next one? Yeah, one of the things that looking for uniqueness in this particular community did is it inspired people who do ironwork.
Mm.
Okay, and now there's like a thriving small residential scale ironwork industry going on. So you might find that there are people who do brickwork or some kind of specialty carpentry or stained glass work or something like that. A unique community attracts unique craftsmanship. Okay, so there's a real cause and effect. Okay, next please. Yeah, this one I wanted to show you because again, it's about the power of uniqueness. And so on the left, you have a 1744 market shed, right attached to the part of the building you see there, which is Ben Franklin's first fire station. Okay. The buildings you see on the right, on the building closest to us on the right, the larger openings, that's the parking above the commercial on the first floor. And the building farther out, the first floor is commercial. The second floor is parking. And then the condominiums for 3 or 4 floors above that. All right.
That's mixed use.
The whole idea is they put a whole lot of new parking in a very unique historic district without making it open lot. Okay. The whole thing is, the zoning said no open lot parking. And guess what? The developers found clever architects instead of resistant ones. Okay. So, okay, can we go to the next one? And this is more the scale that you're likely to have here, particularly in your village cores. And this happens to be Boulder, Colorado. And the building is, a wrapper building in that the buildings come out and face the sidewalk. So you're walking around in your 15-minute community. You're going to pick up milk and get a prescription filled or something like that. And then maybe go over to the park. Okay, get the milk after you go to the park. But anyway, but you don't walk through your commercial district and have that condition that is closest to you on your sidewalk, a sea of parking. The parking is in the middle of the block, at grade, but in the middle of the block. So you enter that block and it's a rather large parking lot by going to the side street and then going in behind those buildings. And you can enter the buildings from the back as well. Okay, but it gives your sidewalk, your street trees, your lighting pattern, an integrity that real villages have traditionally had. Okay, it's and so you want to encourage, you want your zoning to encourage developers and their consultants to design to the sidewalk. Okay, people will find a place to put their cars, and a lot of people, I know I've been in a lot of meetings over the years where people have said, well, how will people know where to park? Well, first of all, people who live in the community know exactly where to go. All right. People who don't live in your community, so somebody comes in from Chittenango to Fayetteville for whatever reason, and they're coming to a specialty shop and they've never been there before, they'll read the signs. I know it sounds weird. When people go to a new place, if they know the address of the place, they'll know where their GPS will tell them you're in the right block. All right, and they'll look for the signs of where to park. Or if they're really skilled, they might parallel park. Okay, I like going up and down Euclid Avenue, and watching the students park, and I can tell who's rural, who's suburban, who's urban. Okay. The urban people get it right with 6 inches to spare, front and back, and they do it once, bam, okay? The other people try 4 or 5 times and then try to go on a side street. But in any case, this is the texture you want in Fayetteville and Manlius, okay? You want it to look like a village. When people make a decision to move here from, say, I don't know, anywhere else really, because they're, there's a new job at Upstate or, or someplace like that. And they're thinking about, where do I want to raise a family and where do I want to live, as in not just, have my house. Where do I want to circulate? Where do I want to meet my friends and neighbors? And, where do I want to go out and volunteer? Where do I want to be in the community? If they walk your main street, okay, then you'll get a texture like this. If you walk streets where, it's 7 rows of parking and then a small building, okay, block after block, they're going to look someplace else. And there are alternatives in Onondaga County that are just fine. Okay, you got to keep that in mind. You're competing.
Could an example be, going to what you're saying is if you take Fayetteville Town Square where Target, Tops is right there, right?
Yeah.
All the parking is, you got to go through the parking to get to the store. And as I look at this picture here, imagine if Target and all the stores were facing right along Burdick Street. Walking around, the parking would be behind almost, is what you're
Yes,
saying, right? And then that would create that setting, that village setting that Fayetteville sort of misses.
Yeah.
And it really hurts the walking. I always think of, having lived in different cities, is I always feel for people that have to walk because we are such a driving centered culture. And if you're not a driver, you are behind the 8 ball. And I like what you're saying in terms of, I just keep thinking, wow, this creates a whole different setting. Why do we always have to think that parking has to be in front of the building? Right?
Yes.
And that's what you're basically saying. Let's think creatively. And I like the word textures. How do we create an environment?
Yeah.
We have 2 giant, projects, a Village of Manlius project that's coming online, and then the proposed project that is across from Town Center that will be within our, near future. And so this is so helpful to think about, because we read strong towns and whatever, but if you're not living in it, steeped in it, these concepts of a retail wrapper and these quick ways of imagining and being able to articulate to folks, this is what's possible. So it doesn't feel like such a reach, doesn't feel like a binary either or. It's how to make it work together. That's so helpful. And that's what we need right now for advocacy too, because people don't know, our neighbors don't know how to talk about what they want.
Yes.
So that's what's going on. So thank you. This was really useful.
I really like also too, it made me raise a question for me, like how to articulate or how to argue for the notion that aesthetics don't require you to sacrifice convenience, transit,
Not at all.
convenience,
Not
and
at all.
commerce, commercial activity. Aesthetics are not going to squelch that.
Right.
Design.
And they don't have to cost more.
And they don't have to cost
No.
more.
And it'll probably even enhance, like as you were saying in Philadelphia, that 1/4, the first picture you're saying, the value of that neighborhood, right? People are
Sure.
willing to pay to be there, even though they're in a very old. And I think that's what people always forget is good design leads to good value.
And certainly has traveled extensively. I mean, uniqueness does attract a certain type of it. There's an emotional reaction to a community that has these unique features and unique textures. It does make you consider, oh, I'd like to live here. This is a nice place to have some kids.
But
It does matter.
can I be honest that I know I'm resistant to the idea of promoting something that's just, here we are, a little quaint, here's what we looked like in 1950. I'm not looking to promote something that's about the past as a focus. Incorporating the things that feel, the fact that Stickley's here and the nature that we have and lots of other things. But that's another challenge, being able to talk about it, not in a interpreting classic historic preservation in any way.
Right, okay.
So, but more about the way we live or the way we want to live. We've been working so hard on this conversation about what is the essence of what we're looking for, and people have said that the 15-minute commute piece seems really strong, but also aging in place, also making sure kids have places to go and to be. And so those are things that have bubbled up from our process. And so I would want those things to be represented in the conversation about architecture too.
Yes, and it's usually my wife just retired in 19 as a historic preservation consultant. She and I have we talk business over dinner a lot, and we're not always on the same page. But here's another way to think about promoting good texture without feeling that you have to promote what we were in 1880 or 1950, okay? Simple word that most people get an image from, Main Street.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
If you say Main Street, people get a picture. And they usually get, I've tried this out with friends and family and students, and I don't have that many friends because I'm always interviewing them as I'm talking to them. But you say Main Street, they almost all get a sound picture of commercial buildings that face the sidewalk
Mhm.
with pedestrian scale lighting,
Mhm.
street trees, awnings, and nice display windows and people you know. Right? And so Main Street doesn't get old, all right? So that's a way of talking about that idea that doesn't trap people in a local history or a very old version of the community.
Mhm.
Okay, Main Street.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, can we go to the next one, please? Okay, so this is Skaneateles, on Route 20, and this is, one of the versions of Main Street, okay? And so as you put your ordinance together and you illustrate it, and you might have an appendix that says, that has maybe 10 versions of central New York main streets,
Mhm.
okay? Obviously exquisite ones, Skaneateles, Cazenovia, okay? But there are other ones. Baldwinsville has some an interesting downtown texture, a little quirky, but okay. And I can send you some images if it would be helpful of some main streets that are a little beyond central New York, but will include central New York. I can send you some images of Chestnut Hill, which my students think of. This must be a separate village because Germantown Avenue is a quintessential main street, okay? So you want to get that kind of, those images and the wording that goes with that so that you can get that out of those who want to build here.
Mhm.
So you want them to run toward that.
Now, that's still a 4-lane highway.
Yes, it is. Yes, yeah. And it's
So
actually.
that doesn't look quaint, you know?
No, and quaint is, sometimes quaint is about style, and sometimes it's about scale. And maybe ideally, it's small scale and a particular historic style,
Mhm.
okay? But it doesn't have to be those things.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, it's Route 20 and, I think they still argue about the garbage trucks going out to Seneca, landfill or whatever, but it's a minor part of their lives. But I think, when people see this, they realize, okay, Main Street can actually be a major through street.
Mhm.
In fact, actually, they kind of don't work if they're not. So you actually want your Main Street on Route 20, Route 5, Route 11, okay? Okay.
Super helpful. No, super helpful because we have so many opportunities. Route 5, Genesee Street at the bottom of the hill, but this is we're working also with layers of municipalities, right? So we're having this conversation at the town level, but we work with our villages.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
that shows our interconnectedness and our interdependence.
And I also think that people who are going to move here from anywhere else,
Mhm.
the first thing they're going to look at is where they're going to have housing. And so, so they're going to look at your villages and at your village-like textures.
Mhm.
Okay, so subdivisions that look like traditional villages to the extent that they can. All right. Again, this is farther up the street on Route 20 in Skaneateles. So the lake is off to the right. It's that part that slopes down to the lake,
Mhm.
all right? And, but you're still on Route 20. Trucking comes through there and so on, but they've aggressively taken care of the tree lawn and the trees, all right? And then one of the beauties of having all that vegetation, and we'll come to that more aggressively in a moment, is that it sucks up a lot of that pollution that comes from being a major route. Okay, the air quality is not nearly as negative as it could be.
Also noise.
And yes, it does absorb noise as well. And it's also beautiful. If you're on the sidewalk, you're walking in a kind of minor tunnel and it feels like home. Okay, next, please. This is Sagatt's Harbor. A very different view, not a main street, but a residential street. And again, you want your words to talk about street width, whether or not you want parking, curbside parking. You want to talk about the tree lawn, and you want it wide enough to handle the root systems of oaks and maples. Okay, don't get trapped into a narrow tree lawn.
You said tree lawn.
Tree lawns, that's what we call it. I mean, there are other names for it, but the green strip between the sidewalk and the curb.
Great, that's
Yeah.
great.
Okay, in my neighborhood, I live in Scott Home neighborhood in Syracuse, and a lot, we and a lot of our neighbors, we plant in the tree lawn. Okay, and so, and then we fiercely protect it, and so it adds to ecosystem performance. You know, and again, it's beautiful. You can walk up the sidewalk on our side of the street and on the other side, and several places in our neighborhood, and you're kind of suddenly like, wow, there's vegetation everywhere on the street side and on the front yard side, and the canopy overhangs. Okay. And fortunately, a lot of us have started to forget the '98 Labor Day storm, and trees are okay again. So, okay, next, please. So, you know, and so this is the introduction really to the environmental side of the things you want to talk about in your ordinance. Okay. You know, I think for decades, zoning tended to talk about simply the relationship of architecture to street. Okay. And I think what you really want to also talk about is how does your community perform environmentally? Right? We know the psychologists and the neuroscientists will tell us that people live calmer lives in the midst of serious amounts of vegetation. Okay. By the way, it also calms students down in elementary and high school to the point whereby their grades go up. All right, we're working on a project right now at ESF to convince Syracuse City School District to make small woodlands out of every single school site. Okay, you know, so, but you know, if you're looking at a neighborhood revitalization, one of the beauties of that tree lawn is you can do the things you see in the center and toward the left, and of course, people can make their own choices about what to put in their front yards. But if you allow them to plant on both sides, as a lot of my neighbors do, they'll take control of both sides. What you get out of this is you suck up an incredible amount of pollution with this vegetation. Okay? Think of your urban forest as being at least as important as all the gray infrastructure your public works department spends money on. Okay, it will collect and clean rainwater. It'll keep a lot of it and let the rest go. Okay, but much cleaner than it would have been if it had just rolled off the concrete or the asphalt into the drainage system. It will give you shade. Okay, you will use the air conditioning less, and yet conveniently, if it's deciduous trees, you know, in the winter, you won't have the leaves, the sun comes through. Okay, so you get the benefit of that. The aesthetics are beyond question. I mean, okay, but you also get something called a forest bathing effect. And if you ever, yeah, you can look that up. You can Google the term, and you'll probably get actually more on it than you want. But Basically, forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku is the Japanese term that we copied it from, forest bathing. And it refers to the fact that in a forested atmosphere, you will get a reduction of heart rate, a reduction of blood pressure, and a reduction of the chemistry of anger or fear. Okay, your amygdala reacts to it. Okay, it's one of those leftover things that we use the wrong way sometimes. Actually, a lot if you read the paper. But those things are improved by having a community that has lots of front yard gardens, lots of gardens in the tree lawn, and also canopy. Now, so if your ordinance, you can decide whether you want to require a certain amount of vegetation or how much is voluntary. But should I assume that at least the two villages have an urban forest master plan?
That's a good question.
We do, they have tree commission,
Yeah.
they do have knowledge of their trees, and they take care of certain ones of them along the street, but I think everything's volunteer, and so it ebbs and flows about how actively it's managed.
They're pretty much oriented, as I understand it, around stormwater management.
Okay.
But that's sort of the level, right? That's the level, and to comply with sort of to meet the threshold of sort of the granting opportunities that are there from the state and the, and the county maybe. So to save the rain, yeah, that's all happening. So those projects were invested in rain gardens and things like that. But I don't think anywhere in the town that I understand is there a push or a knowledge and a conversation about the way that non-lawns help us.
Okay.
And or community gardening or any of those things. We don't have like a really strong community conversation about that.
So you may want to have a conversation about that.
We're still doing, pesticides are still like a sprayed on people's lawns. There's still like a little bit of a keep your lawn
Mandate
perfect.
that every constituent read Douglas Talon's book, they take back the nature back in your yard or unyardifying your community.
Yeah.
So-
Then we run into that.
What you were saying though is is there a specific protocol or system when you say urban forest management plan or a system? when you
Well,
use that term, what does that mean? Does that
Okay.
mean lawns like lawn care, or is that really meaning trees and such?
It's really a discussion primarily about trees in your community. And it's also taking a look at what do you want them to do? So one is that there's the stormwater management aspect of it, which I think is what most citizens are mostly aware of. Okay, trees have value because the root systems pick up the stormwater and help clean it and send it out. So there's less expense for waste treatment, okay? And that's kind of the most basic public works argument. But you also want to have the air pollution argument, okay? How many pounds of particulate matter a year does, say, one maple tree take out of the atmosphere? And it's a lot, okay? So your air, not just your water quality, but your air quality is also a function of your urban forest master plan, okay? And to know how much vegetation you're going to want to achieve a certain amount of work, that requires somebody to look at that, who can calculate, the amounts of work trees might do. And also even, since they grow from small to large and then have to be managed and certain ones
Well,
die.
that's one of the things
and
that I know Fayetteville has paid attention to, is that they choose short trees under the wires, because now we have so many beautiful maple trees with a giant hole cut in them.
Yeah.
So they blend in into some other short trees that they use that's what they plant, so that they never get tall enough to hit the wires.
Mhm.
And they take care of them, and they also, I know they're giving medication to the ash trees now. So somebody is sort of monitoring some of the trees, but it's only the trees on public property. It's not It's not the board.
right, and
You can give them medication.
You're like, oh, I have some in my garden. I gotta take
no,
Can I say that and to further to that, we've talked about how the air we breathe isn't segmented by municipal lines.
right,
So we've talked about how we want to, because we're a climate smart community and we're working towards all our even higher levels of certification, our next step is to do a full inventory of the trees with the tree commission and work together and be able to make the case that we have a goal around CO2 reduction. It sounds like we'd also want to have a goal around air pollution reduction. And that would maybe allow us to talk about the public benefit across the board so that if we have locations where we need them, we can go ahead, like we know a whole neighborhood is going through a period of aging and their trees are so old that they need to be, they're dying. It's a really huge group. Like there's a neighborhood, Homewood is a neighborhood where lots and lots of trees are reaching their end of life. So how do we negotiate as a government institution that we care about that there's no obligation on the part of the homeowners right now to replace that, what's being lost there, but do we have an obligation? How do we manage it? We manage our lighting districts a certain way, our sidewalk districts with lines, and to really to taxing. So how do we do it with, these are the things we're wrestling with.
yeah. And I think that, the community certainly wants to first approach the public with the idea that this stuff matters.
Yeah.
Okay, this is about not only aesthetics, it is about public health.
Yeah.
Okay, and so managing stormwater, but managing air quality is very much about public health and also managing people's moods. Okay, that lowering the blood pressure and heart rate and the chemistry of anger is not a minor thing to do. Again, pick up your paper and look at what happens when anger runs rampant. And again, we know, I've had students do work in the West End of Baltimore, which is almost the best place in the United States to get yourself shot, okay? But when you show people, you could have new housing and no trees, or you could have new housing and it looks like it's lost in a forest. Everybody wants the housing lost in the forest, because even as an image on a screen, people go like, wow.
So if you're
Watch them settle.
going to your point, I've seen a lot about this recently, what you're talking about, and I heard a fascinating study by a criminologist. This person was looking at crime or something, and they noticed an anomaly. I'm not going to tell the story right, but either way, what it led to her was the understanding of the power of trees. And through her research, because she went totally, just what you said reminded me of it. She said, looking at a picture of a tree can do so much for your well-being, they found. But she got into the whole, what you're talking about, the design, the importance of forests. I saw a Danish study or somewhere in Europe where they did a study of people who walked through a wooded street versus a street that had no trees, the blood pressure, they could chart all the things that you just listed. They were able to show a difference.
Yes.
There's these people who had a different walking pattern. So, and I think what you're saying is, what we want to show developers or put in our zoning is these performance metrics. We're trying to hit these certain ideas. We want a cleaner air. How are we going to get there? Trees, cleaner water, right? So somehow we got to show that and illustrate how it's not a burden, but it's actually a value.
Right.
Am I saying that right? Right?
Yes.
Because too often, I remember when I worked with some developers here at Syracuse, they didn't want to plant trees because it was a burden, it was an extra cost. So they were determined that this particular shopping center, they showed all the trees that they said they were going to do, but I happen to be working from one of the sides of this. They said, just ignore those trees. We're never going to plant them.
Yeah,
And that's where-
that's too bad.
Yeah, it is, but that's why it's so important that as citizens, you're talking about enforcement, being actively involved and following along and being proactive, I think, is these guys are doing. What do you want your community to be, and showing how, I like how you put it, you gotta be proactive with the developers. Why is it in their interest to plant these extra trees?
Yeah.
They're not a negative.
And the thing is that in so many communities, the space is there, okay? It's not like you're jamming into a space that might otherwise be making money, for example, okay? The space is there.
Right.
And I would suggest that reach out to ESF. Okay, we do public service on every continent except Antarctica. Reach out to us. We will find a team that can help you think this through. Also, the USDA Forest Service has a northern research station on our campus. And Eric Greenfield is the person we often go to on projects where we need their advice. And I've had him on a number of my students' thesis committees. And he can walk you through certain programs that help you calculate. So if you set up your ordinance to say we want X amount of space for trees along, say, 6 blocks of a particular street, he can help you calculate how much work will that do. And it'll do that much work. He knows what he's talking about. Okay. So what I want to emphasize really is pursue this, but the advice you need is within about a 5-mile radius of where you are.
So, right.
Okay,
It sounds like it boils down to, we have to think about the trees as infrastructure.
that's
Right,
the word.
That's exactly what I'm
That's the
making
word.
the case for.
You say that again,
to
trees
everybody.
as infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
What's
The
that?
same way they get utilities.
Yeah, it's not
They
just a
need to
nice
get,
thing. You need, this
Great
this
term.
portion is no lesser than good roads that are plowed,
Right, and
clean water.
And we
Yeah.
require,
Or
when you
storm
build a
sewers.
subdivision, we
Exactly.
require that you put in drainage. We can just say, we require that you put in tree too.
But if we can make a scientifically validated
Mhm.
argument that
Yeah.
it will benefit this much and therefore it's worth this
Mhm.
investment. It's,
Well, then we have to think about the different kinds of account, like a savings account, almost, or the same way the community benefit agreements sometimes work in other ways to say, okay, you put X amount into you build your division, subdivision, and your HOA has like a tree fund within it, or whatever, we come up with the subdivision, or if it's commercial, it's like, you're gonna put X amount into the tree fund, tree tax, or whatever it is, so that we are also, maybe we find out what the barriers are for them. It's like, listen, we're a company that's coming in the building and leaving, or whatever it is. We have to make sure that we're anticipating those. People have done this, like other communities have figured out how to get them over the hump of dealing with this infrastructure.
Exactly. And again, like Main Street, infrastructure is the magic word. It's municipal infrastructure. Because it's a system that works to the public benefit. Okay? And you can prove it. There's something you just said a moment ago, and I lost, it made me think about something, I lost the thought. It'll come back. For sure.
Can we go to trees of infrastructure? We do also have to be mindful, because this happened to us with one of our projects, is that we're supposed to be putting trees in front of it, and when we're right about to go and do it, the city came along and said, no, there's pipes right there, so trees can't go on the building because the roots are gonna go into the pipes.
Well, thinking actually having the infrastructure folks actually understand that infrastructure too.
Yeah.
It's a lot, it's a heavy lift, and I mean, if a lot of the things we're doing now, we're like, oh, we're trying to articulate this so that we can share the information with other towns that are gonna go through this in a couple of years anyway. So the idea of being able to say to the county, we have some, OSIDA is a county partner that's doing the tax, payment in lieu of taxes for big projects, the pilots. So, I mean, we have some functions that allow us to think about it, but it is hard, it's a lot. It's a lot,
It
but
is a lot.
it's essential, but we're gonna have to, it would be great to have academic partners to be able to, we don't even have a planner right now, at the town level, so,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
anyway, and you're like, well.
But
asking part of
another
that.
thing too is that, again, after this meeting, Google Urban Forest Master Plans.
Yep.
And there are a lot of them you can download from communities all over the country, ranging from, literally from New York City to small villages in Idaho. They all have different needs. They all have different kinds of, civic structures and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But the work to be done, the infrastructure aspect of it is the same. It mitigates stormwater, it mitigates air, it addresses air quality, and it gives you the forest bathing effect. Okay, and those are important things. Just another example of, maybe, as one of my neighbors suggested, it can get out of hand.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm sure if you back up across the street, it looks like it's, so we got a neighbor right now who's letting their tree lawn go to become a pollinator
Right,
thing.
pollinator
And,
friendly, yeah.
And his next door neighbors are not happy, okay, because it looks messy to them.
Yeah.
Um,
Our code right now is all about, we'll come mow
If you let it get
if you let it
that
get too long, so, being able to also work with the public to build, there's more acceptance that's coming in, I think, because you're seeing more and more people do maybe even veggies and pods, things in their front lawn, those reducing their lawn landscaping, it's happening, particularly in the village, but in some of these, other places, it's just not there yet.
Well, and I think, I just want to point out that Sustainable Manlius had a conversation about this just Thursday. And they're going to come up with recommendations. So we're off the hook on that one. They're going to come up with, because there's I don't know who started it, but there's No Mow May. And so Town of Manlius will participate in No Mow May, but there will be rules for what you can do during No Mow May.
And that's it, it's a step towards it, to be able to build a campaign of awareness.
Yes.
Because you can have signs that's like, oh, what, they're not just ignoring their lawn? No, there's something intentional going on.
And just I'll stop with this particular part of the discussion with this. The environmental scientists will tell you the single most efficient and affordable thing that communities can do to combat climate change is grow and manage an urban forest. Period. Okay, those who want to do other things, reinvent, we'll give you clean coal or some stuff like that, put a lot of energy in it. No, plant the trees. It's not that hard. So, by the way, these are Canadian cities, the last three that we looked at. So, I had some people try to explain to me though that, it's too far north, you can't, blah, blah, blah. No, I can do it in Ottawa.
Yeah.
So can we go to the next one, please? And here we were talking to an organization called Jubilee Homes in the city's southwest community.
Yeah.
And one of the points we were trying to make with them was that even if you don't want to buy trees, okay, remember where we live, the default condition is forest.
Right.
If you do nothing
They're
in
gonna
your
plant
yard, the trees will arrive,
Mhm.
okay? A couple of the trees in our yard arrived because I was pushing the mower and my wife said, stop. I said, "What?" She says, I want that tree. It's about this tall. Okay. Her father was a landscape contractor, so she knows her trees. I'm a city planner. I don't know trees. But, they're now big. Okay. So we were saying to, Walt Dixie and his crew that, look, for your specific housing, spread out through the southwest neighborhood in a number of places, if you want to get more urban canopy, come get us or go see Steve Harris, the city arborist, and his team, and they'll let a resident know that thing that looks like a weed, okay, that's going to be a tree. If you leave it alone, you'll get a tree. All right. And of course, we looked at examples of going left to right. What you can get if you just simply let the occasional weed grow into a tree. What you can get if you want a garden and you also want the trees, and what you can get if you're like my wife and you are deadly serious about gardens and you want trees. All right. There's the assumption out there that trees cost a lot of money. If you let them grow on their own, they don't. If you want one in your tree lawn, the city usually will give it to you for free. City, I don't know how the town works here, but you might want to think about that. But you can get a lot of canopy and it's worth it to get it. And then there's that issue, and this again, I talked about zoning as a design discussion. It's also a place-making discussion. So think about where we live. Okay. If you were an Onondaga before the French explorers arrived, okay? If you were an Onondaga, your sense of what it means to live here is you live in absolute forest.
Mhm.
Okay, this is the natural condition of this place is like northern Norway, Finland, Sweden. Okay, it's forest. Okay, and so when you encourage an urban forest or a community or a town forest master plan, you are saying this is about sense of place. Everything here was carved out of forest. It's a forest community.
Tending to work with the forces of nature versus fighting the forces, because it's the natural, it's to our advantage. We're lucky we have this.
Exactly, yes.
The other
Yes.
6 communities would die for this, but I think what you're saying is, how do we maximize what's already here? You don't have to work against it, let nature do the
A
hard work.
lot of
first.
it you can
right?
let happen.
That's
Yes.
right. It's just a matter of how we put the wording in, the zoning, like the placemaking. Getting people to understand that.
No.
And I love just the details of all these benefits. I think people only see the shade.
Yes, exactly, but it's way more than the shade. But but as we warm, the shade matters more than ever.
I've seen
Okay?
those studies.
I love this. We've got our campaign like phrases already, way more than shade, shade matters.
Hey, that's that, and by the way, there's levels of campaigns, there's what you want from your citizenry as a whole. What you punch it into the elementary schools, okay? I work on urban ecosystems in a Basque city in northern Spain, Victoria Gasteiz. So they're trying to get the young people in their community to understand the power of eating locally. And so they've got these community gardens that are buried in their forest. It's green Spain.
Are they the slow food movement
It's
anyway?
part of that, it's part of that, yeah, okay. And so they realize that if they want voters to vote for the policies that emphasize eating locally, which means a relationship between the city and the rural hinterland, okay, so they're already looking way ahead, that they gotta get the 4th and 5th graders thinking about it. So I happened to be at an event where they were talking about vegetables. And you think, how do you do electron carrots? But they were talking about vegetables and soil and what farmers really do and so on and so on. And so one of the teachers said to me, I had my grad students with me, comes over and says, when they're 30, they'll vote in a way that supports this, okay? So you have to, as you think about planning, which is always about futures, okay? Think about how you're talking about these issues in your school districts. Okay? Talk to the young people so that they feel like they are citizens of this forested community. Okay, next, please. Yeah, just further examples of that. And again, you show them to people in a public meeting and they go, oh my God, that's possible. The short answer is yes. By the way, Steve Harris is fighting hard to get 28% canopy cover. The space is there for 50 without looking packed in any of our neighborhoods in Syracuse. And we did one slide, which is not here. You can do 75% canopy cover, okay? It's just that I think he would have to start.
Well, I don't know when you moved up here, but Syracuse used to have that before the Elm stuff. Every
Oh, yeah,
street was
yeah.
every street in Syracuse was a ton in the summer.
Yeah, we had the same in Philadelphia. We lost our homes on our street too. And,
So,
you know, and I was in a red lined community, but it was still drop dead beautiful because the elms met, the canopies met over the street. Okay. And people sat on their porches and cried when the elms died. I mean, it was the
It was
emotional loss. It happened here after the 98 storm. you know?
yes, we remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the youngest and the oldest trees, right? Were especially vulnerable.
The next one, please. And that's just kind of a summary view of what a lot of your neighborhood streets could be. And the question is, how do you softly arrive at that as policy? The emphasis here, softly. And you've said some of the right things. It's infrastructure, it is public benefit, okay? It is investing in the future of public health. All the ways that we think about that. Okay, and you can do it, and the three on the left there are kind of your basic urban strip mall situation that where, you know, plant the trees and, you know, in ways that divide the parking rows. And then institutional. In the Southwest community, congregations aren't as full or as strong as they used to be. It's gotta be 50 churches, okay? If every one of them had 2 or 3 trees on their property, go for it, okay? It's a contribution they make to the sacred human journey, okay? Okay, next, please.
I love that you make it so stark.
Okay, and yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, this is the kind of thing that if, you know, no matter how strong a commercial base you might be capable of having, if you build it looking like this, it doesn't benefit your 15-minute community. Nobody wants to walk through this kind of texture. By the way, that's an accident that almost happened. The driver in the red car made a big mistake. But in any case, after the horn honking and swearing, it all calmed down. But you want to bring your commercial, think about that Boulder, Colorado image again. You want your commercial to come out to the sidewalk and people will then walk your community. There are sidewalks here. This is Route 3 up near Watertown. But nobody walks that sidewalk.
This
Nobody.
reminds me of, I was just out at,
Feels like purgatory.
had to go out to Radisson, we went out to Great Northern, and then was that Route 31? Hey, that's just gonna be a dinosaur in years. People aren't gonna wanna be out. I mean, who wants to walk? You have to drive to everything from the Dick's store, and everything is set back with huge parking lots.
Yes.
You know, so going to your point, I would love to see an air pollution monitor, you know, what that is reading, all those cars driving, sitting. It's gotta be a toxic soup of
I'm
air.
sure it's quite ugly, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
as
and
the-
just very miserable to be around. What kid would want to, what, you know, as teenagers, you walk everywhere you used to.
We've got the river so close
Yeah.
and, you know, elevating Erie project on Erie Boulevard, once those trees mature too, we have
Still,
even
yeah.
more. I think it's gonna be an example for at least central New York wise, or maybe wherever, that, you know, that what could be, that you can actually use it as a connector. One of our big goals has been around how can you navigate? So your 15 minutes, and how could you actually navigate from one part of the town to another?
Yeah.
Whether it's greenways or whatever, and that's, we worked hard to think about that, but,
And your sense of place is tied to also regional landscape. It's a
Yeah.
canal
yeah.
corridor landscape.
Hello, can I grab that door? How are you doing? Can I keep that open? Let me grab this door a little bit. Squeeze in behind you.
16 months away from my 90th birthday.
You are? Fantastic.
Where do you want me to sit here?
Oh, feel free. We're finishing up one meeting, getting ready for the town board meeting. You can sit anywhere right here.
Oh,
Yeah, just join us for this conversation about zoning.
okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that is something that you are simultaneously thinking about. What are we doing for the town? What are we doing for the villages and the larger subdivisions? You know, how are we thinking about Main Street? How are we thinking about school sites? How do we think about neighborhood streets, residential districts? But then also, you know, how do those things contribute to our sense of place in a regional setting?
Yeah.
And those work together. So just, you know, further, again, textures we don't want. And we can go to the next one. Route 11 in the Shenandoah Valley, paralleling 81, and Stanton, Virginia, to allow trucking to more easily get off 81 and go into the communities, they widened Route 11. So now if you own one of those houses, when you step off the porch, you're in the moving lane,
Yikes.
okay? I'm sure that whoever lives in that house with the hanging plants there will not be able to sell it. Okay, so just as you would, if you have to do any street widening, just don't doing, I know that, I'm sure none of you would ever do that, but I just.
She
throw
just
it in
carried
there.
this picture around with you wherever you're going. Yeah,
It's
don't do
it's
it,
one of
don't
my
do
shock
it.
value pictures, yes. Okay, next. Or here, this is in Jefferson County. Again, if you think about new housing in the fringes of the town, don't carelessly drop apartment buildings like that. Those are not places.
Ah, we avoided one of those disasters. There you go.
Go to the next one, please. Yeah, you know, if you come out and you need to get to your car or do anything, you walk across the wet grass. Okay, and again, it's in Jefferson County. It's either under 200 inches of snow
Mhm.
or it's raining. Okay, so you know that kind of model for quick apartment housing, not the model. Okay. Next. Or strip malls that look like Tidewater, Virginia, semi-colonial development. It's not a street there, it's a parking lot. So no fake parking, and certainly not in front of the stores like that.
Like
Okay,
the
and
Bridge Street one right now.
yes, yeah. And then one last thing, this is the last slide. And it's, you know, Pearl Street mini storage. This is out near Watertown too. And so, you know, you think about it, you know, you have so much junk and you filled your basement with it. And then you had to put the rest of the junk in your attic.
Mhm.
Then you bought that little red barn you get from Sears
Mhm.
and you put junk in that. So when that all fills up, you got to go out to Pearl Street mini storage and drop the rest of your junk in there. You don't want to do that in Memphis. Okay. So that's the last of the textures we don't want. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So guess who, when we were working on the changeover from Camp Drum to Fort Drum,
Mhm.
guess who actually designed Traditional Village?
Ooh,
U.S. Army.
Oh, US
Mhm.
Army.
Okay, this is military housing. Okay, and we go to the next. Okay, with planting strip and sidewalk. Okay, you know, the Army came in and did Village Right for the first time in about 80 years in the North Country. And those are now mature communities. And one of my sons-in-law was in the 10th Mountain. Well, he's mostly in Afghanistan, but for a while he was in the 10th Mountain, living there. And, you know, beautiful housing, okay? Yeah, you know, traditional housing form. So think about that also when you're thinking about residential development. Traditional housing styles, you know, you want the housing to address the street. Okay, even if you have parking to the side and you park and enter your garage and enter your kitchen from there, that's fine. But, you know, but make the frontage address the street so that your house is in the community. Okay, you know, you're not hiding from your neighbors by being on the back all the time. All right, the Army they did a good job of figuring that out. Okay? And then getting the words right. And go to the next one, please. This is from a study done by the Center for Rural Massachusetts called Dealing with Change in the Connecticut River Valley. And here they showed you what your legal documents allow and what you probably should be trying to do. So this is a situation of what is. And then if we go to the next one, nobody realized that their legal documents allowed that kind of thing to happen in a farm. It was a farm site that nobody wanted to farm anymore. And then go to the next one, and they could be doing that. And the whole emphasis here is, what are the assets to be protected? The arable land, the wetlands off to the left, okay? The forest could handle the invasion, particularly if people also plant on their residential properties afterward, okay? So the forest could handle the invasion, and so that was the recommendation. The farmland remains arable land. Maybe somebody might want to lease it or whatever. But once you put the housing and another road on it, it won't come back to that use. So, you know, ESF being a weird school that has a pre-selected group of environmental do-gooders, as you all well know, We've had people graduate and go and buy farmland,
Mhm.
okay, and make it sing,
Mhm.
okay? So you want to make your words protect the assets. So any of the local streams, creeks, woodlands, steep slopes, okay? Protect how they're built on. And again, talk about them as an inherited legacy of forest living. But also, those things do work. Wetlands are incredibly important, okay, for example. Okay, the next set, and this I think is the last set. So again, a typical, rural road, subject to development, probably something happening in a nearby city, new job opportunities or whatever. You see the strip development along the main road, you drop the house, you hang the housing on the interior road there. And it just makes it so that what the new community is doing is taking so much energy and acreage per person, okay? And then finally, what you could do. Same amount of people, okay? Same amount of commercial, same amount of residential,